Excellent. So my clock's showing 2:01, so we'll get things underway. First off, a quick hello to everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is tactical advice for capturing the value of innovation in construction. This is part one of a four-part webinar series called The Power of Innovation. And the purpose of this four-part series is really to bring forward innovation insights, strategies, and tools to help foster innovation within your own organization. When really the main goal of this series is to give away and give some ideas around how to drive bottom line profit. So with that being said, before we begin, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself, your moderator for today. My name's Kyle Hume. I have 12 years of experience advising clients within the real estate and construction sector. I've previously held the role of Assistant Vice President at RioCan REIT, and I'm currently BDO Canada's National Real Estate and Construction Consulting Leader. My focus in my day-to-day is really helping construction companies grow, whether that be through strategic planning, optimizing operations, or what we're going to be talking about today is enabling innovation. Outside of work, I'm definitely kept busy with my 7-month-old son. And to be honest, if I'm looking a little tired today, now you know why. So to begin, what I hope to cover today and over the next hour is to really run through about a 20-minute presentation, which is going to be followed by a panel discussion with 3 industry experts. And the panel discussion is really to further explore the key innovation insights and themes that I'm going to be presenting over the next 20 minutes. Also, as we go today, if you have any questions, you can add them to the chat. If we have time at the end, we're going to address them. If not, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. So what do we really hope to cover as part of today's session? There's really 3 leading objectives. The first is we will explore the shifting macro landscape of the construction sector and really speak to some of those recent accelerations we're seeing when it comes to construction innovation. We're also going to share some insights into how to effectively deploy innovation within your organization and the importance of creating innovation, an innovation mindset and an innovation culture. And last but not least, we'll share some strategies and frameworks as well to kind of help foster that innovation within your organization. So with that being said, let's get started. I want to really start this conversation around those recent innovation accelerations that are going on. I really want to answer the question about why is innovation happening and what are some of those leading innovation trends that are going on right now within the construction industry. And I want to kind of first start by talking about that changing construction landscape. And you're probably looking at this slide going, why is there a picture of a car assembly line when we're supposed to be talking about construction? Well, to be honest, there's some corollaries between the 2 industries that I want to share to really help paint a picture of the significant change that's happening within the construction industry. Similar to the construction industry, a car manufacturer builds an asset. It builds an asset that's made up of many parts. It builds an asset that comes from many different suppliers, that involves many different skill trades, and has various different specifications based on the underlying customer needs. And if we look back at the history of the car manufacturing industry, you're going to see significant waves of change, whether that be industrialization through the 70s and 80s, to globalization through the 90s, and now to digitalization in the 2000s and onwards. And not to mention, all along that way, there's been a significant change in what customers are wanting and needing in their cars. Now, these waves of change, or as I like to say, big moments of disruption, significantly shifted the way that cars were built. And it had a dramatic impact on market dynamics. And most importantly, it really shifted value around the industry. And what I mean by shifting value around the industry is it caused some organizations to flourish. They took advantage of these changes and really grew their business. And some organizations shifted value the other way, and that they actually started to decrease in size or eventually fail. And so these waves of disruption cause opportunity, and they cause a bit of disruption that requires organizations to shift and change. And taking that consideration, when I look at the construction industry at the moment, it almost feels like all these big moments of disruption are happening at the same time. These waves of change are disruptive, yes, but like I said, they present sort of a unique opportunity to create new competitive advantage or differentiation within the market that you operate. So peeling back the onion for a moment, what I really want to do is take a look at some of these emerging trends. Take a look at what's happening when I speak about industrialization, what's happening when I speak about globalization, and what's happening when I'm speaking about digitalization. And let's not forget as well that the customer needs are continuing to change. So when I'm looking at things from an industrialization perspective, what I'm seeing is that there's an increasing push towards offsite construction and more so of an on-site assembly. The permanent modular construction market share of new North American real estate construction projects has grown by greater than 45% between 2015 and 2018. This means that there's more and more fabrication happening off the site, and those are being brought onto the job site only to be assembled. Moreover, what we're seeing is more and more technology is actually being brought into the job site themselves to ease with complex construction and to allow for more assembly-like creations. From a globalization perspective, we're seeing new material technologies, and some of these new material technologies are causing materials to become more lightweight. And when you mix that in with improved logistic capabilities and decreasing logistics costs, it's really allowing for a more and more global supply chain. In addition, what we're seeing is that large construction players are continuing to expand beyond their existing borders to lay claims to opportunities in other countries. From a digitalization perspective, a lot is happening both on and off the job sites. We're seeing significant emphasis on BIM adoption, increasing drastically, especially with the emergence of COVID-19. And moreover, we're seeing construction companies leveraging even basic data and analytics now to help make predictable business decisions. So really leveraging those data sets that they have across their systems to help make predictable decisions. And the last thing we're seeing when it comes to digitalization that's kind of top of mind right now is around those wearables on the job site to really help effectively or more effectively monitor health and safety of workers, especially as job sites adjust to the new norms of COVID-19. And last but not least, from a customer perspective, I mean, customers are continuing to evolve, and there's more and more demand for technology-enabled assets that are infused in those final builds. Not to mention that customers are looking and have a heightened focus on sustainability and sustainable buildings and really ESG at large. And the last thing I'd say from a customer perspective is, let's face it, in the sense of they're always looking for lower and lower costs, which are really compressing industry profits more and more. So why I'm talking about disruption at the beginning is because I really want to focus in on what innovation is. And innovation is the ability to counteract disruption. So whether it's a small challenge that you're facing on a job site, such as a slow process that might be eroding margins, or some of these macro changes like industrialization and digitalization that I'm bringing forward, innovation is really about creating value and finding new ways of doing to solve your current and existing business pain points. The goal or the outcome is really to find new ways for growth or find new ways to drive profitability. And that's really about doing things better than you are right now. It's really about that counteraction of disruption. So then the next question is the construction industry focused on innovation today? And my answer is yes. However, there could be a lot more innovation taking place. And I'll share a few stats and indicators on why I believe this is the case. So if we look at the construction industry at large, it's safe to say the industry is the biggest industry in the world. Yet, even outside of crises, it's not performing at a productivity level of other industries. According to a study by McKinsey & Company, the construction industry has only really seen a meager productivity growth of about 1% annually for the past 2 decades. When you compare that to other industries are clocking in at about 2.8% of average increases in productivity growth over year. So there really hasn't been a significant amount of innovation in the construction industry to try to find better, faster, and more efficient ways to build assets. Now, with this being said, there is a lot changing, and a lot has changed over even the last few years. If I look at innovation spending amongst the top 2,500 construction companies globally, they've actually increased their spend on innovation by 77% between 2013 and 2017. And this is a significant point of growth. However, that overall level of innovation investment still remains low comparative to other industries. On average, construction companies are spending about 1.4% of their net sales on growth. And that's compared to an average of 4.1% across other industries. So what that's roughly saying is that construction companies are roughly spending 3 times less financially on finding new ways of doing to either grow their business or to optimize their business when compared to other industries. So a quick takeaway I have from these stats and showing this information is to maybe look back at your own organization and look at typically how much are you spending on innovation right now comparative to your net sales? Do you think it's in line with that 1.4%? That's kind of that indicator of typical spend in the industry. Now, even though as I'm showing that productivity remains quite low, there are some leading signals that point to significant acceleration of innovation within the construction sector. And I thought it was important to kind of share a few of those with you today. And the first one that really stands out to me comes from a report from JLL, their State of Construction Tech report, that said in 2020, because of the pandemic, the construction industry has adopted more technology in 1 year than would have normally taken place in 3 years. So the majority of this adoption is coming from technologies that really focus on working remotely, focus on job safety, and really focus on overall digital collaboration tools. A second key leading market indicator that I think is very powerful was a study done by KPMG in 2020 that was evaluating the digital maturity of Canada's building and construction sector. And what the study found was that about 90% of respondents said that their company was investing in digital technology to create a lasting competitive advantage. And that's a pretty profound stat, saying that based on the surveyed construction organizations, that 90% of companies are investing now in digital technologies to create business advantage, to create competitive advantage. And the last point that I'll make note of that's kind of signaling acceleration was a study published by Rancour that found that 70% of construction companies believe those who do not adopt digital ways of working will actually go out of business. So that's a pretty staggering stat, that you're starting to see an industry that has historically been typically risk adverse towards change, and more specifically risk adverse towards technology change, is becoming more and more open towards innovation and the adoption of technology capabilities. Now, I wanted to shift gears for a minute, as we've already talked about a little bit about innovation and the acceleration of innovation and a bit of disruption happening in the market. And I wanted to shift gears, talk about enabling effective and sustainable innovation within your own organization. So the reason I chose a rowboat for this slide is because effective innovation really requires an organization rowing together in the right direction to be successful. The velocity of a team working together for one goal, as cliche as that may sound, is really the secret sauce to enabling innovation. So for that reason, I thought it was important to spend a little bit of time on what are those elements of innovation that are a necessity for success. And so what I wanted to talk about today, and just to show the power of how important culture and governance is when it comes to innovation, is I wanted to let you know that 70% of digital transformations fail. So let me repeat that again. 70% of digital transformations fail. Think of spending $100,000 on new technology and then directly throwing $70,000 of it in the garbage. The failure that's happening when it comes to digital transformations isn't about the technology itself. It's rather the governance and culture that wraps around the technology. In other words, it's people that's causing 70% of digital transformations to fail. And so it's not the technology, it's the people. So hence the emphasis and focus on culture and mindset. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to share a little bit of insight to make sure that organizations are part of what I like to call the 30% club, or the club that makes it through digital transformations with success. And we at BDO recommend organizations focus on the 4 C's: commitment, capabilities, culture, and capital. Now, while we don't have time today to go in depth about each of the 4 C's as part of this presentation, I did want to share a little bit of insight to get you thinking about these 4 C's as they apply to your own organization. So I'm going to first start off with commitment. So commitment to innovation has to come from the leadership team. It has to come from the top. The most successful organizations communicate commitment from leadership, and they show it through into the day-to-day operations of the organization. Moreover, middle management needs to be signaling innovation as well. The most successful companies that are doing innovation really have everyone bought in and committed to innovation. Lastly, the one other item I wanted to bring forward when it comes to commitment is the proof is in the pudding. And what I mean by that is organizations need to really show that they're committed to innovation. They need to commit to an innovation project. Maybe it's a quick project with low risk, but what they need to do is commit and then share in the success or the failure of doing that work. There's nothing better than showing commitment than by actually doing. From a capabilities perspective, the second C, the one thing I wanted to highlight is don't let day jobs get in the way. Time and time again, we see organizations struggling with adopting innovation because business or day jobs actually are getting in the way. Leaders typically task staff with who are their rising stars with these special projects. However, they don't take anything off their plate. They just continue to pile more and more work on. And this only causes people to feel overworked. And quite frankly, it slows down the overall progress of completing that important project that you decided to do in the first place. Moreover, when you're determining project teams, it's really important to look at the broader, look outside, let's say, what you would envision as your initial project team that may come to mind. Too often, we see technology projects in isolation being done only by technology teams with little to no business input or involvement. So I always recommend that you create teams that have unique complement of people with different skill sets and experiences who really will approach a problem a bit differently and provide that unique view on creating solutions. And lastly, be true to what you know and what you don't know. I mean, if you're not an expertise in technology or your organization doesn't have the skill set, but you see a lot of value in doing the work, lean on third parties to support you. It really helps with making things happen as effective as possible. So we've talked about commitment, we've talked about capability. We'll now talk about culture. And let me first start by saying that culture has a significant or a profound impact on innovation. And to be honest, a huge impact on the organization's ability to adapt or change with inevitable success. The key question that needs to be answered is how do you foster an innovation culture? In other words, how do you make it feel real? And to be honest, that really starts with changing behaviors. It's about building innovation into the organization's day-to-day. Examples could be weaving innovation into individual performance objectives or weaving innovation into organizational strategic objectives. The idea here is really about creating motivation amongst your staff and amongst the organization to get excited about thinking about solving problems and then going and finding those solutions. The last of the C's is truthfully capital. What I mean by capital is that you must allocate a budget at an organizational level to innovation. Innovation is truly that investment in the future of your business, and funding must be able to make it happen. I can't stress this enough, and in a minute I'm going to talk a little bit about return on investment and moving away from cost. And all I can say is that just from an innovation perspective, make sure you're supporting your expectations around innovation with an efficient level of capital to spend. So as we close out our presentation, there's just one last objective that I wanted to talk about. And this is really about sharing a high-level example of how an organization of any size or scale can really help prioritize innovation. And so what you're going to be seeing here as the slide comes up is you're going to see an image of the innovation 3 hurdles model. And this model is a systematic way to really take various ideas that come across the organization and prioritize them effectively to ensure that you're spending your, to be honest, your limited time and your limited capacity on innovation projects that will, to be honest, give you the most benefit to your organization. Think of all the balls on this slide as different ideas or opportunities that your organization may have. As you can see in the model, as you make decisions, the balls get filtered more and more and more through the funnel. And then you're really left to get just focus on a few balls that matter most to your organization. This is equally important because it also ensures that you're not spending time and capital on things that don't provide much value. So if you're looking at this model, the first thing you want to do is really get all those ideas down on paper, whether it's running a an innovation campaign, whether it's doing a brainstorming session on pain points within your organization. The idea here is to kind of get all those ideas down. And then you kind of move to that evaluation stage. And that evaluation stage really has kind of 3 key hurdles that you have to pass before you're going to spend time and effort on any of the ideas that are put forth. And that first question that you're going to be asking is does this idea or this potential innovation align with your strategic objectives? So as an organization, are you focused right now on growth within your market, maybe changing construction into a new asset class? Are you potentially interested in expansion outside of your existing market? Or maybe your focus right now is on bottom line profit and you're trying to optimize. And so what you need to do is ask yourself, does this idea really match to those strategic objectives that you're chasing in the moment? And if you can answer yes to that, it's only at that point that you should really jump to the second hurdle. And the second hurdle is does it have the ROI that you're expecting? And what we see a lot in organizations is that organizations spend a lot of time on costs where they're saying, I don't know if I want to spend $100,000 on this technology implementation. And really the question should be is what do you think that return is going to be on spending that $100,000? If you think it's going to lead to $500,000 in growth, then that should be a no-brainer. Or if you think it's going to lead to, say, $150,000 in optimized processes, so you have to spend less time managing projects, then it's also a great idea. So you really got to figure out what that ROI expectation is on projects, and then being able to apply and look at that and try to quantify that ROI for every idea that you're bringing forward. And the last key hurdle that you have to ask yourself is, can you actually do it? Do you have the right teams? Do you have the right skill set? Do you have the right capabilities, whether as an organization or with third parties, to actually execute and get that ROI that you're expected? So why I share this model is if you can get through those 3 hurdles, it's really only at that point that you should be considering launching an innovation project. So with all this being said, I want to close out the presentation portion of the webinar series. And I want to say thank you for spending the 20 or so minutes with me. I know I've went through a lot of content, and that's why we're going to shift to a panel discussion with our industry experts to further explore some of these great insights and learnings that I've just shared with you. So with that being said, I'm going to ask our panelists to jump on their videos, unmute their chats, and maybe Eric, you can start us off by giving a brief introduction, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate that. So I'm Eric Pacell. I'm the Executive Vice President for Advisory and Innovation at WSP, which is a leading design and consulting firm based here in Canada. And so I oversee, in fact, everything that's involved in our Canadian strategy around pushing innovation within our company and our business. And really looking, the design industry very much has been very responsive to the construction industry because it's one of our big clients and for the outputs. So a lot of what Kyle was talking about there is elements that we're facing and dealing with here in the design industry as well. So really excited to be with everyone today.
Excellent. Farah, do you want to say a quick hello?
Of course. Well, first off, I just wanted to say thank you to Kyle and BDO for inviting me into the conversation with CCA today. I am Farah Kimji. I'm the founder of Futura Funds. I'm also the president of Toronto Crew, which is Commercial Real Estate Women. Having worked in the commercial real estate industry for the past 15 years in a finance and investment capacity, I now work with landlords, asset managers, and developers to advise them on their tech adoption and more broadly, innovation strategies. And I'm really excited to engage and contribute to today's conversation.
Amazing. And just to add some complication to the panel, we've invited another Kyle to take part. So Kyle Camaro, I'll pass things over to you to say hello.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kyle. Thanks for having me today. So a bit of background on myself. I'm the president and CEO of Camaro Developments. So right now we have about 6 sites we're working through zoning and site plan approval on, which are mixed use developments through the Greater Toronto area. Prior to that, I was with RioCan REIT. I was AVP of Development Construction. So worked on a variety of different complicated projects for them, from commercial to mixed use, residential, apartment, etc. And prior to that experience, I was with PCL Constructors.
Excellent. Well, why don't we get into it right away? And I really want to spend some time, as I mentioned, focusing in on some of the key concepts that I brought forward in the first 20 minutes. And maybe I'll start off by asking a question for each of you. And this is really about holding back, or what do you think is stopping innovation? So what do you feel is really holding back the construction industry from investing in more innovation than they are now? And based on that, what advice would you give to the industry to kind of overcome some of those barriers? And maybe Eric, just based on your experience, I'll let you take the first shot at this one.
Thanks, Kyle. No, I appreciate it. And I mean, you showed a number of great slides in your presentation, and one of them kind of showed that the reality is disruption in the construction industry, really hasn't been a big subject that's really been out there. It's been kind of more incremental change and not big, large disruption. And in fact, what we're seeing now is with technology and where it's going, we actually really are at a place where we're starting to see that there's going to be significant changes in the way we do kind of the design and the construction realm out there. We're realizing more and more, I mean, very, very akin to us in the design industry. I mean, yeah, we went from, drafting tables to AutoCAD, but I mean, in terms of giant shifts in technology since then, we're seeing we're on the cusp here of where, automated equipment, automated design, artificial intelligence, they're all going to be coming into this industry. And, you're showing how kind of the construction industry has lagged behind in terms of the efficiencies in the industry year over year. And I think this is going to kind of just do a really big leap. So it's one of those things is adapt or get left behind is I think we're at the cusp of that area there. One of the good things is, since the construction industry has generally been more conservative, is that the technology is reaching a good level of maturity before it jumps on. So, understandably, the construction industry doesn't want to be bleeding edge in what's going out there, because, they're constructing everything from bridges to buildings, which have to have a certain amount of durability and guarantee on what's being delivered. But now with the way technology is going, I think we're really going to see that disruption happen in the industry. And it's really a factor of what's getting delivered. And the fact that, unlike a lot of things, it's got to have a lot of durability, what's built by this industry.
Farah, Kyle, any thoughts following Eric's comments?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that, I feel like construction companies don't want to really venture down that road less traveled in such a risky sector where one miscalculated move can put a whole company on the line. I think also because of the aggressive timelines and budget allocated to each project with, relatively low profitability, sometimes there's this preference for just going with the traditional construction time-tested processes. So the other major challenge is just the sheer number of players involved in any given construction project and really their weight on that decision scale. So for example, let's say there's a revolutionary material chosen by a developer that may not be accepted by a regulatory agency, or a new VR hardware used by an architect that's not compatible with the old technology used by the engineering firm. So, you've just got a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to say. I think the most pressing issue, though, is what you've mentioned, is just the lack of overall investment in research and development within the construction sector, being below 2%. So what's that really telling us? I think while most other industries have undergone, tremendous changes over the last few decades, and they've really reaped the benefits of process and product innovation, the construction sector has been hesitant about fully embracing, the latest technological opportunities that are out there. And because of it, labor productivity has sort of stagnated accordingly. I think this is, there's this sort of unimpressive track record that can be attributed to both internal and external challenges, but that what I mentioned, that fragmentation of the industry, inadequate collaboration with suppliers and contractors, the difficulties in recruiting a talented workforce, and sort of insufficient knowledge transfer from project to project, just to name a few. So the data does show us, though, that a change in the mindset of the industry and all of its shareholders is kind of more urgent now than ever. That companies need to start adding innovation in their strategic plans as soon as possible, really. And that it's just sort of a matter of time before we see the sector's leading companies, embracing this post-industrial era of construction. And I think sustainable construction with the use of new technology will not only boost productivity and increase profitability, but will also create, a safer work environment. So I think the use of technology is important because it will also attract millennials, sort of filling that gap left by the retiring baby boomers, which we know is, a big issue in the industry. So it's just kind of time now. I sort of say innovation just, it isn't a choice, it's a must, or you'll be left behind.
Kyle, any thoughts on your side?
Yeah, so I think one of the main contributors is the construction industry has just been booming for the last, number of years. And this has left a lot of companies very stretched thin on resources and, I guess, time management for their employees. And couple that with historically people not liking change and very closed-minded mentality around it, right? They want to always do what they've been doing and just stick with the way they know. So I think that's a large contributor why innovation in construction is so far behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's and what's really interesting is, and I think every industry's felt it. I mean, COVID's definitely made an acceleration and got organizations and leadership teams to push harder and think faster and think unique and innovation in a way of innovation over the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months. But what's really interesting is how do you sustain that? So a lot of organizations were pushed into innovation. They didn't have a choice, so they've done it. And then how do you make that stick and carry that forward over the years to come? And that's going to be the key. And when I look at some of the disruption that's happening and just the ability to leverage technology, for instance, on and off job sites, there's going to be a significant change in the ways of working within the industry. And I really, really think holding on and sustaining that innovation and that culture around innovation that was almost forced upon the industry is going to be really, really important to strive moving forward.
Yeah, got to keep the momentum going, right?
Yeah, exactly. Keep the pedal down to the ground. So I'm going to ask another question, and this is about more on the people side. So how do you, we talk about innovation, and a lot of innovation is around ideation. How do you bring ideas forward? Because if you can hear ideas, then you can start thinking about how they might impact your business and then take that and actually solve business problems. And so how do you enable people to continuously bring these ideas or new ideas forward and challenge organizational norms in a positive and constructive manner? And Farah, maybe I'll ask you to give some comment on this first.
Sure. So I think the innovation mindset is very different from the let's get this project done on time and in budget mindset. But it doesn't have to be this way. I think your funnel was a really good depiction of that. But, when you're looking to innovate, you kind of have to leave some room for failure. However, I don't really like to use the word failure, but rather learning. So this means kind of testing out that new idea on a smaller scale or in a test format before rolling it out company-wide on every single project. Or maybe you start in one department and just really learn what works, what doesn't, and course correct and iterate along the way. I think typically management structures of really successful and innovative companies tend to be more flat, and that enables opportunities for more open communication amongst all levels of employees, where they can feel like they can bring things up with management or suggest new processes or ways of doing things. However, though, if a flat organizational structure doesn't really fit your company, the alternative is to have an innovation champion who can bring management's attention to great ideas. You can have them in groups across the business and different departments as well. But whatever method you follow, I think it's just important to ensure that you create genuine pathways for ideas to become reality within the organization. And I always like to say, benchmark against the best. Don't look at the lowest common denominator in the industry, but rather look at the highest. Look at other geographic markets as well. See what the bests are doing out there, and learn from them and see what you can implement in your own job sites. And just remember that tech is not the enemy. I also like to say tech is not tech is the how, right? There's the problem that comes first, and technology is not always the solution to every problem. I think we think that in today's day and age, but tech is the how, and it's not the enemy. And our industry, the construction industry really has vast potential for, improving the productivity and efficiency, through digitization. There's all sorts of new innovative technologies and construction techniques. And I think we've already come a long way, right? So it's important to look, there's now, emergence of augmented reality, drones, 3D scanning, printing, BIM, autonomous equipment, all this kind of stuff, advanced building materials as well. And they've now kind of, some of them reached maturity, like market maturity. So, that the industry is evolving, and you can start adopting and using these innovations and really just start putting them into your projects wherever you can. And just remember, tech isn't the enemy. There's still going to be, a place for us in all of that. I think people kind of feel like, oh, well, adopt technology and it'll replace my role on the job site. No, it just make your role on the job site safer, more productive, better quality, create more productivity, and allow you to do bigger and better things as well. So, I think we just have to create that openness. The world is changing all around us, and there's no reason for the construction industry to be left behind.
Yeah, I think you've made some really, really good points there, Farah. And like one that stands out for me is when you said learn from the best. I mean, the construction industry should really try to stand on the shoulders of giants. And what I mean by that is looking at the big companies and seeing what technology they're deploying, because they've already done the innovation, they've already done the R&D testing, they've already put the capital behind it to make things happen. And so that idea of what I call fast following is really, really important. But you got to have a pulse on the market. You got to know what's happening and what technologies are being deployed and how it interrelates with other stakeholders within this construction process. Eric, on your side, I mean, what are some of the key learnings you've found in your role at WSP when it comes to ideation and really getting individuals to think about innovation and bringing ideas forward?
Yeah, great question there, Colin. And in fact, it touches a lot with what Farah was saying. In fact, one of the things you realize as an organization is there's, especially when you're in a more traditional industries like construction and design, is you always have this kind of center of mass that'll always kind of bring you a certain amount of inertia. So it's really making sure that you create an ability to be able to pull people out of their day-to-day, to encourage innovation and also to foster it and help them along. Because what happens is, since this industry isn't used to doing a lot of innovation at a high speed, right? This isn't a startup, a .com environment. This isn't the DNA of these industries. is you actually have to have a process in a way that you can, first of all, have an open forum where people are supported to innovate, but also help them develop their innovations as well, because there's a lot of great ideas out there, and that's not what we're lacking. It's really being able to kind of take it from idea to something that you can position and take out there. And what we see often is that you'll get this kind of initial flurry of excitement. Things will all come together, and then all of a sudden you kind of slowly die on the vine because day to day kind of sets back in. So, what we're doing is we're really looking at creating a framework around to support people kind of through the whole process so they can develop their idea through and do it fairly quickly as well. And I think the other big learning that, we tend to do in this industry, since we are more conservative, is that whole kind of fail fast, fail forward mentality. You're talking about following, but also, if an idea goes wrong, that's okay. Stop doing it, figure out what you can learn from it, and then move forward. Often what happens is, again, this sort of industry, like, we build stuff. So we're like, well, there's a way to fix it. And the problem is you can actually spend 10 times more effort fixing and trying to develop something that really isn't going to have the ROI you were thinking about, just because of the mentality of this industry, where it's like, oh yeah, well, we'll figure a way of making it work. But not being afraid to just say, hey, you know what? This was a great idea. It didn't have the right result. What can we learn from it and apply that to the next one around? I think, these are all things that, tech has gotten down pat, but we've got to kind of learn. And you talked about standing on the shoulders of giants, and those are the sort of things we've got to learn from the industry. Because you know what, I can guarantee you, the designers and the constructors out there, they always find a way to make it work. But is it, at the end of the day, got the ROI we were looking for, and the savings and the improvements we were looking for, or did we just like doggedly push a project through? So I think it's really making sure there's a safe environment, giving the right structure, because it's just not in our DNA. And then also having the courage to say, hey, you know what? This idea was a great idea on paper. It's just not translating out. Let's get lessons learned and push that to the next idea and push that one forward. I think those are some really good lessons learned that we can apply to help drive it in this industry, as I said, as we start getting that kind of muscle reflex on how to deal with innovation.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because if you sit people in a room and you talk about ideas, there's ample amounts. There's so many different ideas, but where organizations falter mostly is turning that idea into execution. And so one of the questions I had for the panel is around, once you've brought a new idea to fruition or brought it forward, how do you start prioritizing them? And I know I shared a little bit on one of my slides about the funnel and things to look at, but love to hear from you around how do you prioritize ideas? And Kyle, maybe I'll pass it over to you to start us off.
Yeah, so I think it mostly comes down to the timing of the idea. So like, where are you on the life cycle of a project or within your company? And how does that idea integrate into that company? For example, like if all your projects are midstream, you don't want to introduce a new project management software where you're going to have to change everything over, and it's going to be a lot of redundant work. So maybe that's something you implement on new projects starting up, and it's kind of going forward basis rather than going backwards. But yeah, to prioritize it, you have to do your cost benefit analysis. And then you're, again, who has done that idea and what training is required around those ideas as well, right?
Yeah, I like the idea around timing. I mean, it's really important. You don't want to do something new and add more frustration and more pain and change in the middle and call it a project mid-flight. But I also see the benefit of getting that new technology in place, like you said, and then maybe applying new projects to it from that point forward. So I like the idea you brought around timing. I think it's really valuable. Farah, anything else to add on your side?
Yeah, I'll just say, you have to walk before you run, right? So if you're going to try to go and implement, let's say, robotics on a job site before you even have a functioning workflow or, resource management tool, that just wouldn't make sense, right? You have to make sure you're kind of incrementally getting more and more in advance. So I'd say it takes a little bit of taking stock, looking at your business, looking at where you do have problems, where there are inefficiencies in the business, and sort of weighing that against the magnitude of risk should that problem continue to persist, right? The risk might be, oh, we get left behind. The risk might be, oh, too many costs, safety issues, all sorts of different issues, right? There could be different risks that, you have internally, but literally weighing out all the different areas of your business and saying, okay, well, we don't need to innovate here because it's not as risky of a part of the business, but if we don't fix this one thing, it could persist, and we'll have a major issue. And then I think just kind of when it comes to prioritizing, also remembering, like back to the point that I made, that not all innovation is tech, right? Yeah. So, really take the time to understand the problem first, why it's a problem, why it matters, and then determine all of the possible solutions before deciding the direction, and kind of weigh that against the ROI as well. And that will help you to prioritize, because it would be great to implement some of the best technologies out there, but if you're going to come out and the project's not going to be profitable because you used robots instead of the traditional method, then what's the point? So margins are already thin on projects, so I think it's just really important to look at all the solutions that are out there, but then really say, well, what's the one that's not going to break the bank, but that would allow us to advance in this area.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I think what's interesting is and you mentioned it about earlier about the importance of being able to really prioritize out and focus on the ROI, and really take that, trying to figure out what the problem is before you figure out the how. So really driving out those problem statements before you're saying, okay, I think this technology or this new material complex is going to help me, or these sustainable building elements are going to help me. So I think it's a really, really good point.
I think, like, I'll just add one little anecdote is people love this shiny new thing, and they just want to, okay, digital twins, and there's all these wearables and all this stuff that's being thrown around right now, but you have to make sure you've done the ROI on these investments first before you just go out and say, oh, we need this new technology. You have to have that plan.
Agreed. So maybe my last question is like, when you're spending time on innovation, it doesn't always turn out as you may want it to. There might be some things that you invested in and it just didn't work out. And so I wanted to ask the panel to learn a little bit of some of the lessons that you've learned along the way that you might lean into next time you're trying to solve a problem, just to provide a little context around that methodology and that work around trying to prioritize and really try to solve that problem in new ways. So Eric, maybe I'll get you to go first.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And looking at it, I would say one of the issues that we found, and it kind of touches a bit what Farah was saying at the end of our discussion there, was often we'll look for ideas and come up with some great innovative ideas, but often we didn't actually ask the basic question, which is what is the problem we're trying to solve for? So we have an amazing solution, but we never really fully define the problem, and as I said, that often lands up being the, again, it's not necessarily the shiny new thing, but similarly where you're like, well, yeah, this is a great idea, we can move this on, but what real issue are you addressing? And for me, it's two big buckets that we like to categorize it. One is internal. How are we actually improving our internal processes and way we're doing things to drive efficiencies? So obviously that then brings in an ROI on the bottom line. Or conversely, how do you actually solve for something that allows us to incrementally improve what we offer our clients, offer a new service to our clients, or really improve what we can do and bring ourselves somewhere else in the marketplace. So it's really, I would say, the biggest pitfall is to really understand what your needs are and really understand what you're trying to solve for, and then really look deep in terms of the solution. Because often with all of this that's going out there, with the Internet of Things, digital twins, as we were just saying, parametric design, automated equipment, like there's a lot of shiny things out there. But what is, for your industry, your project, what is the real problem? And then really try to solve. And I mean, it's a similar problem. I mean, we're all builders here. How many times have we had clients who want us to build something, but they're not quite sure why, but they just need it, right? I mean, it's the same sort of problem here. So it's human nature to want to jump to step two, but spend the time on step one would be my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, and I'd say it's interesting. I mean, you want to balance. You want to balance spending innovation, time on innovation to grow, matched with spend time on innovation to become more efficient and more effective in your day to day. You don't want to spend all your time on one and the other because you might continue to grow and profit margin isn't moving. Or if you get really, really smart or really, really optimized, your growth cycle might fall. So it's finding that nice balance if you can, if you do have a fully committed innovation program. Kyle, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess a good lesson learned is make sure you're running your old system in parallel until you actually know your new idea or innovation works. You don't want to try and backtrace and cover all your steps that you've just lost over the last 6 months. Whether it's, I don't know, an accounting software or whatever it might be to make your system more efficient, make sure it works before you fully implement it and get rid of the old system. Or else that could be a lot of time spent in energy trying to chase your old information there. And then another thing is, I guess Eric touched on this earlier, know when to stop chasing a bad idea. So if you're going down a path, you have to know when to kind of cut your losses on that idea if it's not going to work.
Awesome. And I guess, to be honest, this is going to probably close out our conversation today, but I just wanted to ask any of the panelists if they had any other thoughts or any key things from the learnings or listening to other panelists speak that you just wanted to reiterate or get focused to before we close out.
Yeah, I'll just say, I'll jump in with a point. I think, it's always great to talk about innovation, but I like to link it to sort of something bigger, macro, and a little bit more altruistic as to why it's so important. And, when we just look at it, the world is just changing, faster than ever before. And I think there's some mega trends that are really shaking up the construction industry. So one of them is just, population in urban areas is just increasing. I think the World Economic Forum was saying 200,000 people per day, right? Globally. So all of those people need, affordable housing, and they need, transportation and utility infrastructure. And I think in the face of all these challenges, that kind of puts this industry into almost a moral obligation to transform, right? Yeah. To meet the needs that society has, and sort of like even just the impacts on the climate and on the environment. And so if the construction industry can kind of use, improve and use the use of scarce materials or make buildings more eco-efficient over time, I think, like, when we can tie what we're doing to that it makes it a little bit more of an imperative to say we really need to change. Like, this is for the good of society.
Excellent.
Yeah, building on that, I think the big trend we're seeing globally that hasn't quite come to Canada, but we've seen in the UK and other countries now, is challenging the construction industry to get towards net zero. I think in innovation, thinking about where we're going. The reality is we actually don't realize it, but the construction industry actually is a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, not even through the equipment, but through making concrete and the materials we use and the choice of materials. And so, there's a more and more of a push on how does the construction industry kind of do its part, and where do we go, and how do we get to net zero? So it's gonna ask us to think of a whole bunch of different ways, from the materials we use, how much can we do in terms of different construction techniques, and technology is going to play a big role in that. And I think that's something we've got to keep in the back of our mind, because I think that'll be the next big challenge we're going to see. And then couple that with, we talked about it a bit, is construction has been going, has been very busy. Doesn't show like it's going to have any signs of abatement in the near future. But we do have a labor gap that's coming up as well. So again, how do we address this labor gap? How do we address this net zero challenge? I think those are two big macroeconomic forces that, building on Farah's points, that this industry is going to be facing. And I mean, one way or the other, they're going to need to get solved. And the sooner we start putting our heads together to figure out in what direction we can get there together, both the construction industry as well as the designers that support them, it's going to be important.
Yeah, and I agree on that. Like we need to use innovation as our friend to kind of help us through this process. Construction projects aren't getting any easier. Like we're not getting any bigger sites. All the sites are getting tighter. You're getting less access. You're not getting your land closures. You're not getting your sidewalk closures. You got to use innovation as your friend in this situation because as well as sustainability. All these buildings are getting more complicated. They're getting bigger. It's definitely not getting easier. So the only way we can make our job easier is through innovation.
That's great. Well, I just want to say on behalf of the Canadian Construction Association and BDO, a big thank you to each of you for taking part in today's conversation. Very, very insightful and really, really appreciated. And for those that are on or you can see my screen, just wanted to share a little bit about what we have coming up next. So if you're interested in learning more about innovation, this is part one of a 4-part series. And so we have a few more events coming up. On June 9th, we're going to talk about how to foster everyday innovation in your organization. So we're going to bring some more tactical tools and frameworks around design thinking and applying those in a case format. We're going to then talk about improving digital or innovation decision-making, which is about using construction data and data analytics, and that will be August 25th. And then lastly, in December, which feels a long time from now, but we're going to use that time to really talk about how collaboration can improve the success of your innovation efforts. So on behalf of BDO and CCA, a big thank you to our panelists and a big thank you for each of you for tuning in today.
Thanks a lot, Kyle.
Thanks for having us.